I never thought much about my voice until Marcus told me it was the first thing he thought of every morning. Not my face, not my laugh, not the way I looked in that ridiculous sweater I always wore on Thursdays. My voice. He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like everyone walks around thinking about someone else's voice before they even open their eyes. But the way he said it, sitting across from me in that cramped coffee shop on 5th Street with rain drumming against the windows, made my chest feel too small for everything suddenly trying to exist inside it. We'd known each other for 8 months by then. 8 months of being co-workers at a marketing firm where the coffee was always burnt and the air conditioning never quite worked right. 8 months of him stopping by my desk with questions that probably didn't need asking, of me finding excuses to walk past his cubicle. 8 months of careful distance wrapped in the disguise of friendly professionalism, both of us pretending we weren't doing exactly what we were doing. I should back up. I should tell you how this started, because it didn't start that day in the coffee shop. It started the way these things always start, with something small and unremarkable that only becomes significant later when you're lying in bed at 3 in the morning replaying every moment like a detective searching for clues you missed. It was March when Marcus joined our team. I remember because I'd just turned 32 and was having one of those quiet existential crises that nobody talks about at birthday parties. The kind where you realize you've been living your life in a holding pattern, waiting for something to begin without ever admitting what that something might be. I dated women through my 20s, had 2 serious relationships that ended amicably enough, and spent my early 30s telling myself I was just focused on my career. My friends were getting married, buying houses, posting photos of nurseries painted in soft yellows and grays, and I was taking on extra projects at work, staying late at the office, going home to an apartment that always felt like I was house-sitting for someone more interesting. Marcus arrived on a Tuesday. I was in the break room microwaving leftover pasta when he walked in, and I remember thinking he looked lost in the way new employees always do, that particular brand of confident uncertainty. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, and eyes that were green or maybe hazel, I couldn't tell in the fluorescent lighting. He wore his dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, which shouldn't have been remarkable, but somehow was. "Coffee any good here?" he asked, and that was the first time I heard his voice. It was deeper than I expected, warm in a way that made me think of old bookstores and Sunday mornings. "Depends on your definition of good," I said, trying for casual. "If you like burnt coffee that tastes vaguely of despair, you'll love it." He laughed, and something in my chest did a small, traitorous flip. Perfect. I've been building up my tolerance to despair for years. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. He was from Portland, had worked in advertising before switching to marketing, liked hiking and terrible horror movies and Thai food. Normal conversation, forgettable conversation, except I found myself thinking about it later that night, replaying the way he'd smiled when I made a joke about our boss's obsession with team-building exercises. The first month, I barely saw him. Different projects, different floors sometimes. But then, Sarah from Accounts Receivable went on maternity leave, and they reshuffled some responsibilities. And suddenly, Marcus was sitting 3 desks away from me, close enough that I could hear him on phone calls with clients, using that professional voice people use when they're trying to sound authoritative but approachable. I started noticing things. The way he always brought lunch from home in the same blue container. How he'd run his hand through his hair when he was frustrated with something on his computer. The fact that he wore the same rotation of 4 ties, which I only noticed because I'd apparently started cataloging details about him like some kind of creep. He was friendly with everyone, had that easy social grace some people are born with, but I convinced myself I wasn't reading into anything when he seemed to light up a little more when talking to me. June was when things shifted. We got assigned to the same project, a campaign for a local restaurant chain that wanted to rebrand themselves as Farm to Table, despite the fact that their produce came from the same industrial suppliers as everyone else. It meant long meetings in conference rooms that smelled like dry erase markers, collaborative documents we'd both be editing at midnight, emails sent back and forth with subject lines like, "Help, I'm dying," and "Is this anything or am I losing my mind?" One night, around 11, I was still at the office trying to finish a presentation deck when my computer froze. Just completely locked up, spinning wheel of death, all my unsaved work hanging in digital purgatory. I may have said some things I'm not proud of, possibly threw a pen across the room. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. I can hear you having a breakdown from here. Want help? I didn't even know he was still in the building. I texted back, unless you're secretly an IT wizard, I think I'm beyond help. 3 minutes later, he appeared at my desk with 2 cups of the terrible coffee and a calm competence that made me want to either kiss him or cry, possibly both. He managed to force quit the right programs, recover my work, and save everything to 3 different locations while I sat there feeling useless and grateful. You're a lifesaver, I said, accepting one of the coffee cups even though it was nearly midnight and I'd regret the caffeine later. I'm really not. I just know that exact panic because it happened to me last week. He settled into the chair next to mine, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something subtle and woody. You working on the Morrison deck? We ended up talking for 2 hours, not about work, not really. We talked about everything else. He told me about growing up in a small town in Oregon, about coming out to his parents when he was 19 and having them react with the kind of aggressive support that was almost more exhausting than rejection. I told him about my sister who lived in Denver and was convinced I needed to join every dating app in existence, about my dad who'd passed away 3 years ago and how I still sometimes picked up my phone to call him before remembering. I do that with my grandmother, Marcus said quietly. She died when I was in college. Sometimes I'll see something funny and think, Gran would love this, I should tell her. And then, he made a gesture like something slipping through fingers. The building was so quiet around us, just the hum of computers that never shut off and the distant sound of the cleaning crew on another floor. The lighting was dimmer, after hours, everything softer and more intimate than it had any right to be. Can I ask you something? Marcus said, and there was something different in his voice. Something careful. Sure. Are you... He paused, seemed to recalibrate. Do you ever feel like you're waiting for your life to start? Like you're just going through motions until some signal tells you it's okay to actually live? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something raw in his expression, something vulnerable and honest that made my heart beat faster. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I feel exactly like that. He held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and I wondered if he could see the same thing in my face that I saw in his. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the moment, and we both laughed awkwardly and made excuses about how late it was, how early we had to be back in the morning. I drove home with my hands tight on the steering wheel, my mind racing. I'd dated women because that's what you did, what was expected, what made sense in the narrative I'd built about my life. But sitting there with Marcus, feeling that pull, that magnetic wanting, I couldn't pretend anymore that I didn't know what I'd been avoiding all these years. The next few months were a special kind of torture. We became friends, real friends, the kind who texted each other stupid memes during boring meetings and got lunch together twice a week at the sandwich place down the block. He met my friends. I met his. We went to a baseball game once, and a concert, and a terrible open mic night where we laughed so hard we got shushed by the person on stage. And through all of it, there was this current running underneath everything, the way our knees would touch under restaurant tables, and neither of us would move away. How he'd touch my shoulder when he laughed at something I said, his hand lingering just a moment too long. The night we went to a bar after work with some coworkers, and he got a little drunk and told me I had a great smile, and I had to excuse myself to the bathroom just to breathe for a minute. I didn't know if he felt it too, or if I was projecting everything I felt onto innocent interactions. He'd mentioned an ex-boyfriend once in passing, so I knew he was gay, but that didn't mean he saw me as anything other than a friend. I was terrified of misreading signals, of ruining what we had by wanting more. October arrived with that particular kind of autumn cold that makes you want to stay inside with hot drinks and good company. Marcus had been quieter than usual for about a week, not distant exactly, but preoccupied. I'd catch him looking at me sometimes with an expression I couldn't read, and then he'd look away quickly, like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. Finally, on a Friday afternoon when the office was mostly empty, he stopped by my desk. Hey, do you want to grab coffee? Like, not here. Actual coffee. We ended up at that place on 5th Street, the one with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. It was raining, that steady autumn rain that makes everything feel gray and intimate. We ordered black coffee for him, latte for me, and found a table by the window. For a few minutes, we just made small talk. The weather, weekend plans, a funny email our boss had sent. But there was a tension in the air, something unspoken building between us. I need to tell you something, Marcus said finally, wrapping both hands around his coffee cup. And I'm terrified it's going to ruin everything, but I can't keep not saying it. My heart was suddenly in my throat. Okay? Your voice, he said, not looking at me. It's the first thing I think of every morning. Before I'm even fully awake, before I remember what day it is or what I have to do, I think about your voice. The way you sound when you're excited about something, or when you're tired, or when you're making one of your terrible puns that you think are hilarious. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could barely process what he was saying. I think about the way you say my name, he continued, finally meeting my eyes. I think about how you sound on the phone, how you sound when you laugh. I've got it so bad that I started calling you about work stuff I could have just emailed because I wanted to hear you talk. And I know this is probably insane, and if I'm reading this completely wrong, I'm so sorry, but He took a shaky breath. I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you for months, and it's killing me to keep pretending I'm not. The coffee shop seemed to fade away. The rain, the other customers, everything except Marcus sitting across from me with his heart laid bare, waiting for me to say something, anything. You think about my voice, I managed to say, which was possibly the dumbest response in the history of confessions, but my brain had short-circuited. He laughed, a nervous, beautiful sound. Every morning, it's the first thing. Always. Marcus, my own voice cracked. I've been trying not to be in love with you since probably June, maybe earlier. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that you were just being friendly, that I was reading into every little interaction because I wanted so badly for there to be something more. His expression transformed, hope and disbelief and joy all at once. You're in love with me? So completely it's embarrassing, I admitted. I know what color socks you wore last Tuesday. I've memorized your coffee order and the way you organize your desk and the fact that you always use the blue pen, never the black one. I'm a disaster. You're perfect, he said softly. You're so perfect it hurts to look at you sometimes. We sat there in that coffee shop, rain streaming down the windows, and I felt like I was finally living in my actual life instead of some placeholder version I'd been settling for. Everything before this moment suddenly made sense. All the relationships that never quite fit, all the times I'd felt like I was performing a role instead of being myself. So what now? I asked. Marcus reached across the table, and I met him halfway, our fingers intertwining. His hand was warm, solid, real. Now we see where this goes, if you want to. No pressure, we can take it slow. I just needed you to know. I want to, I interrupted. I really, really want to. We stayed in that coffee shop until they started putting chairs up on tables, talking about everything and nothing, holding hands like teenagers, grinning at each other like idiots. When we finally left, the rain had stopped, and the streets were slick and reflective under the streetlights. Marcus walked me to my car, and we stood there in the parking lot, neither of us wanting the night to end. Can I kiss you? He asked, and I didn't trust my voice to answer, so I just nodded. He kissed me soft and careful, like I was something precious. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone, and I melted into him, into this moment I'd been dreaming about without letting myself acknowledge I was dreaming about it. When we pulled apart, he was smiling. I've been wanting to do that for so long. Me too, I whispered. That was 6 months ago. 6 months of learning how to be in a relationship with someone who actually fits, who makes me laugh and challenges me and sees me completely. 6 months of inside jokes and lazy Sunday mornings, and discovering that real intimacy is built in small moments as much as grand gestures. We haven't told anyone at work yet. We will, eventually. But for now, it's ours, this private joy we carry around. Sometimes in meetings, I'll catch his eye across the conference table, and he'll smile in this particular way that's just for me, and I have to work very hard not to grin like an idiot. Last week I woke up before him, which doesn't happen often. I watched him sleep for a minute, his face soft and peaceful, and I thought about what he'd said that day in the coffee shop, about my voice being the first thing he thinks of every morning. "Marcus," I whispered, and his eyes fluttered open. He smiled, still half asleep, and pulled me closer. "There it is," he murmured. "Best sound in the world." I used to think I was waiting for my life to start. I used to think there was some switch that would flip, some moment where everything would suddenly make sense and feel right. But it wasn't like that at all. It was a series of small choices, small moments of bravery. It was admitting to myself what I wanted. It was Marcus having the courage to tell me how he felt. It was both of us deciding to stop waiting and start living. My voice is the first thing he thinks of every morning, and his face is the first thing I want to see when I open my eyes. We're building something real here, something that feels like home in a way nothing else ever has. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of it. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm here, present, fully alive in this beautiful, terrifying, perfect moment. And it all started with him noticing my voice.